everyone, welcome to Astrology Sphere. I hope you've had a good weekend. I just thought I'd check in with you and kind of give you a flavour of this week's astrological weather. It's going to be quite an interesting one actually. Venus is now firmly in Scorpio, and you know, as I said in my my blog post about the ingress of Venus into Scorpio, this is going to mean some really wonderful transits between the planet of love, creativity and abundance, and then the outer planets. And of course that gets underway this week. So there are some flavors actually from the last cosmic forecast that I did, the weekly, where we're almost kind of continuing some of the themes that Venus was highlighting for us then in quite a challenging way, and we're now kind of integrating this information, and it's becoming a lot more clear and harmonious for us. So let's have a look at the main planets that are going to be operative. So the first one, of course, is going to be Venus, and Venus, as I said, is going to be in Scorpio. So I'm going to kind of put her, let's just say that Aries is rising. So I'm going to put her in the 8th house. This is the natural house of Scorpio, and Venus from here is quite kind of deep and intense, and also demands kind of very high standards of loyalty, commitment. You know, it's quite a passionate and intense sign, and so I think that, you know, what's been kind of happening since she's moved out of Libra is Venus is becoming quite clear about what it is that is important to her when it comes to the type of bonds that she wants to form. And that's going to sort of continue, because later on in the week she's going to make a sextile to Pluto in Capricorn. So I'm going to put Pluto here in the 10th house, which is the natural house of Capricorn. Let's just move that out the way. So of course Pluto in Capricorn is really you know, it's been with us all year, and this is basically the energy of sort of dramatic transformations that are changes that are kind of irreversible, but usually they're quite slow. So, you know, keywords are death and rebirth, resurrection, change, and as I say, it's usually irrevocable or dramatic change, destruction, the occult, and then things like you know, ghosts in the underworld. So this is kind of spooky, you know, spooky energy. This is Pluto is of course the god of the underworld, but you know, the underworld is very important. It's the source of fertility. It's the place where, you know, the roots of trees kind of descend down into. So it's not necessarily a place that we should be afraid of. It's more about bringing to the surface things that we may find a little bit scary or taboo. And I think with this wonderful sextile energy, which happens I think on Wednesday or Thursday, I'm going to pull up the calendar in a minute, we're kind of getting a double dose of Scorpio energy really, because Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio, and Venus, you know, currently being in Scorpio. So what this is doing, I think, is if we think about the elements involved, this is water energy, and then it's earth energy, and it's quite deep energy. So it's underground water and streams, so it's undercurrents, what goes unsaid but can be sensed, and then, you know, also the kind of riches that you find under the earth, so minerals, gems, you know, all of that kind of thing. So I think you know, in a lot of ways this is about discovering, as I say, what's really important to you, and also kind of digging deep to the truth of certain relationships. And this can be our relationship with ourselves. You know, I'm thinking here about Venus in Taurus as being about self-worth, and kind of valuing one's own skills and abilities and what one has to offer in relationships. And then of course Venus as the planet of relationship, being about how we feel valued by others, what we value in relationships, you know, what's important to us, what is our love language. And then thirdly, creativity, which, you know, is linked very strongly of course to self-worth on one hand, but also to beauty and to what really inspires us. So in other words, what is kind of pulling on our heartstrings, and kind of evoking in us a sense of desire. So those are all likely to be themes that come up with this Venus-Pluto sextile. And as I say, a sextile is a really positive angle, so we are talking about positive changes happening. You know, these can be internal shifts, of course, as we get clear about what it is that we value. But equally, it can also be about kind of developing an internal sense of certainty about what it is that we stand for, kind of standing in our truth, unashamedly and sort of with conviction, and also where necessary, making changes that may feel scary to us otherwise. We kind of almost have like a double dose of courage to actually walk our talk and to sort of do what's necessary to sort of make the changes that will ultimately bring us happiness and abundance, and and sort of authentic creative self-expression. So quite a dramatic but also a very positive set of aspects. But before she does that, she's going to be in a much more romantic mood. She's going to be making it as a trine to Neptune, and Neptune of course is currently in Pisces. So Neptune direct from the 29th of November, and I think here what's happening is that any confusion that was sort of highlighted for us at that Gemini full moon lunar eclipse, when Neptune was making a T-square to the nodes, which would have perhaps brought up some situations or issues that may have been confusing or confounding us since June, when we had the twin eclipse, that Sagittarius lunar eclipse back in June. I think what it's doing now is it's giving us a chance to clarify. So it is a very romantic connection. Neptune tends to sort of add a poetic element. It takes us into the mystical realms. It evokes and sort of stimulates the creative imagination, and of course it opens up channels to other worlds and other forms of wisdom, so we can become quite psychic and empathic. But equally, I think with Venus being in Scorpio, we are talking about somebody or an energy that's quite grounded and that's quite rooted in a clear sense of perception. So in other words, being able to cut through BS, being able to cut through any kind of sort of elaborate attempts to confuse or confound, or to sort of embellish, kind of gild the lily, and to see right through the veil into sort of to the truth of the heart of the matter. And I think Pluto is going to really help with that. So we've got this first energy on Sunday with Venus and Neptune, and that's, as I say, going to feel that's kind of elevated love. So this is more kind of sort of unconditional love. This is compassion. It's kind of the kindness that the Buddhists talk about. But it can also, in creative terms, it can also be about that kind of transcendent creative vision that we feel the inspiration has kind of come out of nowhere. Almost when you start kind of creating and you feel like you're channeling. So you start painting, you start writing, or you start composing, you just start playing, and you feel as though there is a tune or an image or something that wants to be written or that wants to come into being, and that we are just kind of a channel for that information. So that's quite beautiful. Now it can also be very inspiring if you're wanting to use, to kind of visualize and to sort of do some manifesting in the sort of upper realms, in the ethereal realms. This is also great for doing that. It can really sort of key you into that energy, so that you're able to really kind of work with consciousness in an intentional way, and really focus and direct the energy, so that ultimately it can manifest here in the realm of the 3D. And then of course Pluto being the sort of ultimate kind of grounder, I think it's almost like a supercharged Saturn, where it's taken on a lot of the qualities that used to belong to Saturn, the sort of the kind of the death element, and also the elimination element. There's a great kind of catharsis and a cutting away of what's not necessary with Pluto. So I think first comes the sort of the more Baroque energy, shall we say, the more kind of mystical, ethereal, poetic energy, which is great also for romance, I should say that. So it can be a time when we are, we kind of we telepathically connect to loved ones, or we get wonderful gifts or messages of love and devotion or admiration from you know, from others, and also where we can really sort of empathize with others in a way that perhaps sometimes is not really available to us. You know, that spectrum of emotion really kind of opens up for the collective, and we're able to really kind of tap into the emotional realm in a way that perhaps we're not normally able to. So it's that kind of those oceanic emotions, as opposed to just the personal emotions. We start to see how these kind of resonate, you know, our personal experience resonates on a kind of universal level. And then, you know, with Pluto later in the week, there may be a need to kind of not necessarily get real, but just to then clarify, okay, what do we want to keep from this? What is the essence of this particular connection? And then what from that needs to be eliminated in order for the more magical aspects to manifest. Now, again, you know, just as with the forecast that I did last time, the Sun is also going to be making aspects to Neptune, but this time, you know, the roles are reversed. So Venus last time was sort of being a little bit temperamental, and it was the Sun that was making positive aspects to Neptune and Pluto. This time it's the Sun that will be making the difficult aspects. So the Sun will be the Sun is in Sagittarius, and so it's over here, and from here it's going to make a square to Neptune. So this, I think, is basically talking about the need this week to really focus more on values, so we're working more with the emotional body than the mental body. And then the final aspect that I think I need to mention is that the Sun will make a trine to Mars, and that's on Friday. So Mars currently in Aries, so here in the first house. And this is one of the reasons why I said that there could be a little bit of ego energy around us. When you get a combination of the Sun and Mars, even though it's a positive aspect, sometimes it can lead to feelings of confidence, but these can sometimes tip over into overconfidence. So I think given that the Sun and Neptune are not really seeing eye to eye, it's probably fair to say that, you know, Neptune is the much more compassionate, less kind of ego-driven sign. Or planet it's a lot more self-sacrificing, whereas Mars tends to be very much kind of focused on self and on kind of advancing the interests of the self. So you know, even though it is important to be assertive and to you know, kind of defend your corner and state your needs in an assertive way, equally, you know, we have to be careful that that doesn't sometimes tip over into a little bit of either pushiness, aggressiveness, that kind of thing. However, you know, we are talking about a trine aspect here, so let's be positive, and let's say that you know, this is giving us a chance to push ahead with plans. It's also giving us a chance to take the initiative in certain personal matters, whether this be career or whether it be relationships. And you know, the other thing to say, of course, is that Mars will be on the weekend making some very positive aspects to the nodes, so perhaps in a way giving an opportunity for clearing up of again that energy from June, because at the time Neptune and Mars were making a conjunction in Pisces, and both of them were squaring the luminaries at that Sagittarius lunar eclipse back in June. So I think almost an opportunity to sort of to clarify and to move forward after, you know, forgiveness, you know, after practicing kind of forgiveness when it comes to, you know, any matter where you felt that somebody deceived you, where somebody kind of promised and didn't deliver, where somebody flaked or somehow disappointed you, or perhaps in certain situations, you know, I'm thinking here about creative situations where you may have felt that something never quite sort of came to fruition in the way that you expected, you know, so there was a sense of like disappointment, you know, that something never quite materialized in the way you hoped. So Mars here with the Sun kind of ending the week. So let's quickly have a look at the calendar so that you can get a sense of dates, and then we can move on to the geomantic reading. So, you know, as you can see from the weekly calendar, we start on Sunday the 6th with that beautiful Sun Neptune trine, and then from there on Wednesday the 9th we move to the Sun making a square to Neptune. So it's almost like you get this beautiful burst of love, heart-based energy that then ascends to the higher kind of iterations of love and creativity, and then we kind of come back to earth and have to sort of contend with perhaps some doubts or some niggles. You know, here I think the sun being in the mental body, maybe casting doubt or kind of asking a lot of questions, and we may not be able to logically explain or justify the experience that we've had or the realizations that we've had at that point. And so that can sometimes lead to a little bit of doubt or sort of self sabotage, and that's just something to be aware of. And then as we get to Friday, we move into, or Thursday rather, it's Thursday the 10th, we have Venus making the sextile to Pluto. So I think this helping to clarify any doubts that may have been thrown up by that Sun Neptune square, and then that's followed by the Sun making a trine to Mars, and this fire trine I think is very motivational, so it's kind of pushing us ahead when it comes to career and success in the world. Also, just, you know, once we've got a clear sense of our values and what we want out of a relationship or a creative situation or a money situation, then having the confidence and the focus and the willpower to go after what we want, and to, you know, to state our needs essentially. And then this is followed up on the weekend by the aspects to the nodes that are happening. So from Saturday, kind of Friday and Saturday, so the 11th and 12th, and of course that Sun Neptune, that Sun trine to Mars happening on Friday the 11th. So yeah, just kind of give you an overview, but let's go back to the board and do a quick reading. Okay, so going back to the casting board, I've just saved a little bit of time by shuffling and pulling a geomantic card to help us to clarify each of these planets for the week. So let's have a look at the overall energies, starting with Mars. Wow, so this is kind of a double dose of Mars energy. Puer here is Mars in Aries. This is fire energy, very in keeping with where Mars actually is. Mars is currently in the sign of Aries, so I think definitely reinforcing my feeling that you know, Mars energy can potentially be a little bit overwhelming this week if we don't channel it constructively. So when it comes to that very assertive and wonderful energy of the Sun Mars trine towards the end of the week, we may be rearing to go, and I think it's very important that we use this you know, energy to kind of go after what we want, and to kind of assert our needs within the context of, you know, work situations, career, as well as relationships, or say a creative project, but also not to be too pushy, because with Puer here it can represent conflict on one hand, but a more positive aspect is new beginnings and taking the initiative, you know. So you know, just something to bear in mind. Let's have a look at Neptune. Beautiful. So Neptune here being clarified by conjunctio. Now this is literally the sacred marriage. So this is the unio mystica of alchemy. So here I think Neptune really pointing to, you know, kind of barriers dropping and being able to really connect with others in a very empathic way, you know, without the usual inhibitions or gaps between us. So bridging the gap, but I think also it's about empathy, it's about forgiveness. You know, this is the sort of the higher echelon of love. It's almost the higher iteration of Venus. So I think really talking about you know, practicing forgiveness, practicing compassion when it comes to others, and also I think working together with others collaboratively. So one-to-one relationships I think being highlighted, or partnerships, you know, creative partnerships. Let's look at Venus. Stunning. Isn't this beautiful? So here with the Venus card we've got more Pisces energy, so kind of emphasizing the connection to Neptune. So Laetitia here is a water element, and this is traditionally Jupiter in Pisces, because Jupiter used to be the co-ruler of Pisces, but I think also emphasizing the fact that Venus is actually exalted in the sign of Pisces. So Laetitia being very it's an expansion in the emotional body, so it's positive emotions like joy, happiness, and enthusiasm. And I love the word enthusiasm because it literally means, in Greek, it's the word for being filled by the god. So being filled with inspiration, being filled with love, being filled with compassion, which I think really is kind of emphasizing that beautiful Venus-Neptune trine happening at the beginning of the week. So a real opportunity here to cultivate positive emotions, have an expansive and perhaps mystical sort of experience, as far as connecting to the higher dimensions, so visionary imagination, transcendent spiritual experiences, visions, connecting to your guides, but also I think huge downloads, so being inspired by the muses essentially on a creative level, and then also using positive emotions to generate abundance here in the 3D. Let's look at the sun. Yeah, interesting. So I kind of feel like what we're being asked to do when it comes to that Sun-Neptune square is to really kind of have the courage of our convictions to stand in a position that might go against the grain, or that may not necessarily be going with the crowd, not kind of worrying too much about what other people think, or if we are standing in a truth that's not everybody's truth, having the sort of courage, not to worry about that too much, not to then let it create self-doubt or sort of self-sabotage if we're not kind of going with the herd. Yes, beautiful, because with Pluto here we're getting a true sense of, with Fortuna Major, this is very, very positive fire energy. This is all about kind of confidence, charisma, good luck. So the fate's kind of smiling on us, and also just feeling very internally strong, so kind of radiating from the solar plexus, standing in our truth in a way that isn't necessarily egotistical, but that's very rock solid. We're sort of very rooted and grounded in our convictions. So and from there I think this then kind of radiates out into the world and creates, it sort of generates success, and it makes people view us in a positive way. So I think here Pluto talking about positive changes that ultimately set us on a course that will bring good fortune and kind of honors and praise and success, but also give us a sense of certainty, inner certainty that we're going in the right direction, that we've made the right choices, particularly when it comes to relationships. Alright, so let's have a look at the overall energy. So this is our sort of overall message for the week. Yeah, so for me this is really confirming what I felt, with that kind of the solar energy potentially tipping over into ego if we let Mars sort of take over. So on the one hand we've got this idea of Khase, which is it's interesting, it's actually the opposite of populous. So this is Saturn in Capricorn, and this is the moon in Cancer. So these are two diametrically opposite energies. So what I'm feeling is that when it comes to creativity and our work in particular, but also when it comes to the way that we conduct our relationships, then there's a sense of mastery that only comes from standing apart, or kind of not feeling that we have to go with the herd. Because Khase, although it literally means imprisonment, and it can mean kind of isolation or feeling cut off from your community, or just from others, from the herd, what it can also bring about is mastery. And in order to master something, you have to really focus on that one thing, and it's the opposite energy of, say, jack of all trades, master of none. So in order to master something, or to really get to the core of something, or go in a particular direction, it often means eliminating other alternatives. So I think here this is really about kind of mastery on the material plane, and sometimes that means it can be cutting back on ego, but I think it's very much about eliminating what isn't relevant, or accepting that sometimes we are going to have to stand alone in something, and that's kind of okay. Doesn't necessarily mean we're wrong. And then here we've got some really positive Sagittarian energy going on. So I think it's kind of saying that if we have the courage to do this, we will reap great rewards. So Acquisitia is really about gain for hard work. So it's almost like a kind of karmic blessing or gift after perhaps a period of hard work or sacrifice in the past. So I think almost saying, you know, after eliminating or after loss comes gains, or because of taking a very singular path or kind of option, this will reap great benefits. And of course, Acquisitio is also Jupiter in its very positive expression. So I think also pointing to that wonderful, very much Jupiter ruled energy that we're going into following, this week, when we move into the week of the solar eclipse in Sagittarius. We've got a lot of Jupiter energy happening then. We've got Sagittarius as being the sign of the solar eclipse, which is of course Jupiter ruled, and then of course Jupiter is going to be very prominent at that eclipse. It's going to be making a beautiful sextile to Venus. So I think just saying that, much better energy is coming. We're turning a corner here. We're moving into a much more positive time, and to anticipate gain and positive developments moving forward. And then finishing off the reading is Rubeus, again water energy. So we've got quite a lot of water in this reading. We've got 1, 2, 3 water, we've got 1, 2, 3 fire, and we've got 2 earth. No air note, which is quite interesting. So I think it's very much saying that we're not working in the mental body at the moment. This is not about kind of anything to do with the intellect or with thoughts. This is all to do with kind of emotions, as well as the kind of higher dimensions, and then bringing it into the physical domain. So Rubeus here literally means passion. It's red, and this is Mars in its alternative, its water expression. So this is Mars in Scorpio. So for me, this is about passion, and I think what it's saying is that when it comes to creativity and relationships, we need to really focus on what makes us passionate, what turns us on, what evokes a sense of desire within us, and use that as a kind of as a measuring stick for for what decisions to make, or what to kind of focus on, rather than the more negative energy of Rubeus, which can sometimes be about brooding or kind of obsessive energy, thinking too much about what we've lost. So I think again, just emphasizing the idea that we need to stay in the positive expression of Mars here, and not kind of dip into and of Pluto. So really focusing on both of those planets in their more positive expression of transformation, reinvention, vitality, confidence rather than aggressiveness, so assertiveness rather than aggressiveness, and also of physical vitality. I think Pur here can also speak very much of physical vitality. So I think this is kind of an injection of health and well-being, as opposed to kind of being too much in ego. So I think that's the way to sort of use the solar energy, is to really focus in on the positive trine rather than the square to Neptune, which means staying out of the head and the ego, and very much staying in the heart, and the high heart as well. So yes, I think a beautiful message overall for the week. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If it's resonated, do let me know in the comments. Feel free to like and share, and I'm wishing you a fabulous week. I'll see you again in due course for my eclipse forecasts.